How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the Data Lab on For Frequency's Sake. This is where all the numbers get crunched, and we help make you a smarter fantasy football player. And joining me here in the Data Lab, hey, we live in the Data Lab, in the data caves. It's the Professor, John Bush. John, welcome back.
Hey, Dennis, it's good to be back this time, week 2 here. Lots of things happening, a lot of surprises. Imagine that, right? That we didn't know what we didn't know. We're moving on to week 2. There are a lot of questions. We got a game Thursday night. I hate Thursday night, but I
Oh,
do like the game, Buffalo, Miami. You got to love those players. I mean, I love all the players, really. I love all the games. It's just so exciting to watch Red Zone and uh, investing at the horses while I watch my fantasy teams romp and stomp. So it was really I get the twofer there on Sundays. But anyway, we got that Thursday. We'll be covering that on our other podcast, Science of Fantasy Football. But we're going to look at the snap count, my report here. I mean, that's what we try to make the data lab really data centric and not a lot of fussing and griping and I mean, we got plenty of that on the other one, and there's lots of foolish things said on Twitter and fantasy, and we could probably spend a whole show just laughing and on about that. So,
maybe
do you
we
have
need
any
to do.
opening comments before we start looking at my snap work?
Yeah, maybe we need to start doing a podcast for the folks at Fantasy Receipts and adding our 2 cents in. But no, it after week one, what I want to encourage people after every week, don't chase points, chase volume. Volume is king, and you can't get to volume without getting snaps. And if you look at the snap data through a slightly different lens, like that of the professor, you will gain an advantage, because the wonderful thing about fantasy football is if you look at data a little bit different than the consensus, and that data provides good insights, you are going to gain on the consensus, and that's where you make money in fantasy football.
It's true. So, Dennis, we're recording this for our site, put it up, but for frequency's sake, we'll have the podcast here. But I like to do videos. It's hard to talk about data if you don't see it. And just one little gripe about what I see is every time I see people showing their podcasts, it's their face. And I mean, that's fine, but they all look like me. They got baseball caps, beards, kind of a little bit heavy. And it's just like, it's all this, it's like me being, 40 years younger. I mean, I understand, but I'm being a professor, university professor, biologist. I like to see the data, and that's what I use as a tool. And Dennis and I are interested in really, and you can come to our Science of Fantasy Football. We want to promote the scientific method. Okay. And the second thing, and I probably should put this, I want, and I know Dennis does too, we want you to learn. I don't want you to depend on me for the fish. I want to teach you how to fish. Okay. I understand there are sites that you pay them every year and they give you their rankings, and you play my rankings all the time, regardless if two players are similarly ranked. I go with the highest rank, number 15 over 16. Really? Data and decision making is not that easy. I understand if that's how you want it, great. But I'm hoping the folks that we find and want to listen to us, I'm trying to show you how I do things. So with this week 1 snap report, you're going to see what I use and what Dennis has copies of. Okay. We use. And that's what I want to do, Dennis. So before I go on the data, what you think about scientific method in teaching the folks how to fish for their winnings in fantasy.
Yeah, you mentioned it perfectly because I see everybody rank players, and oh, this was the 15th ranked
Yeah.
guy on week one.
Really?
So does that tell
Really?
me anything? Does that tell
Really?
me anything? Because
Really?
you might have a 1 point gap from 8th to 15th, or you might have a 20 point gap from 8th to 15th. You need to compare players against a static number level. For instance, looking at quarterbacks last week, Professor,
Yep.
there were 5 guys that had big games of 25 or more points, counting a touchdown for 4 if they
So they
throw
were
it.
above median by my weekly metric, and I know you chart that
Yes.
as well, folks. We're into weekly consistency is our game, and
Only
that's different
only
than.
only 5 guys,
Yeah, it was
Professor.
a weird week, and the tight ends had some weird.
Oh,
It was a
horrible
really
week.
interesting. Yeah, it was very interesting and probably disheartening for many that, certainly you invested in CMC. You had Kelsey, you had Laporta. I could see people a little sad last week. I could see some sad. Amon St. Brown. We're so high on him. I continue. Don't trade him. Okay. If
No,
you're thinking uh, uh, Marvin Harris Jr., okay, don't trade him. I know you want to. I know it's just killing you sitting there, a dud on your line. Don't do it. Give yourself a few weeks and see how this thing's going to shake out, folks. Come on.
if they're getting snaps, that's all I care
They
about.
have life.
If
Snaps is life.
Yeah, and that's what I don't think a lot of people notice. They see the points,
No.
and you could literally have a guy at tight end, especially, who has a 15-point game on 2 catches, both of them touchdowns of a few
Yes.
yards.
Yes. That can
And
be a
then
touch. Yep.
and that player, and he played 30% of the or less of the snaps.
Yep.
That player is somebody I'm going to run away from when it comes to trying to get him on my team, because over the next 8 weeks combined, if he plays 30% or less snaps,
It's going to be
he's
hard to replicate that.
it's going to probably take him 8 weeks to score another 15 points. And that's not the kind of player you want on your team. That's compared to a Colby Parkinson, who played a high percentage of the snaps,
Yes.
got targets, got receptions, and probably will be able to sustain that. But the only way that I know that is because I look at the snap data. But your snap report,
Yeah. So,
Professor,
yeah.
breaks it down better
I
than
I I, I
anything out
try.
there.
I try. At least my method. So I have my diatribe here. I let my figures talk. So I try to design the figures. Sometimes I don't have time to do video. I actually did a video today, Dennis, and it's up on this article. You can check it out on Science of Fantasy Football. So basically I'm trying to teach you how to fish, not just blindly follow. Anything I show you is the beginning of your thinking process. It is like, whew, okay, Bush has worked it out for me. I'll slavishly follow his 15th, 16th ranked snap players or whatever. No, this is just for you to think about things because we look at consistency. I love defense against position. I love what
Oh, yeah.
Vegas is telling us. There's a lot of clues, obviously injuries, pecking order. It is so much more. A system is so much more than one data point, Dennis, 1 week. A system has a lot of things and a lot of what we call fantasy. We don't even know all these subtle interactions, right? Think about a snap happens and player loses its footing or the ball has a funny bounce or so. It just, who knows? Things can happen and it's hard to predict that. So anyway, I have that. I hope, but I say use your diary. Okay, if you don't know what a diary is, start one. Find my video lesson. Does my snap stuff help? And don't just judge me for a week. Try a season or half a season. You know, just see if you feel like you're understanding, especially on waivers and trades and maybe lineups. But you need to use the snap with my defense against position, my rankings, uncertainty levels. There's a lot of things you got to do. So I just hope I can get you on that path this year. Come back next year and you'll be that much smarter, and we'll have all the consistency stuff and everything. So, Dennis, I talk about, I like to start at the beginning, team usages, understanding how not players, but teams divvy up their snap averages by positions. Okay, so that's what I use to think about lineups, daily fantasy sports, Vegas props, waivers, trades, any kind of thing. See what's going on. Remember, this week one, think about in 3 or 4 weeks, we'll have trends, we'll have things that are, players that are ascending, players that are descending. We can check that. So I like, and here's my first figure here is I got Arizona, Atlanta, Baltimore, Buffalo. So I just do in stacks of 4. So the number of players that are graded by snaps. And that's interesting, Dennis. And it's something that I hadn't tested, right? We got this file of, if we have ESPN interns, we want to test this. So no, there are actually some players, situations where there are teams that snapped out 6 wide receivers. Atlanta and a few teams
Wow.
only did 4. What does that mean? Why did they do that? Is that long term? Is that good or bad? Especially for my flex positions. That worries me if I'm doing, I'm reaching on a bye week with a flex in a team that's shooting a lot of wide receivers and giving them a lot of time. 6 players. I mean, in some ways, you want to start with, okay, Atlanta's only doing 4. Doesn't mean I'm stuck there, but it gets my interest. I'm looking for things that are different and unusual. Next thing, here's the positions. Can't really do quarterbacks because we don't use a platoon, except for New Orleans with Taysom Hill. So it's really about the running back, tight end, and wide receivers. I figure out their average snaps, total that up, figure percentages, and look at the distribution, Dennis. Arizona loves its tight end. Atlanta, with Kyle Pitts, doesn't. Don't you
Wow.
wish Atlanta would treat like Trey McBride and I don't know who else is there? Look at 20 that Dennis, they did that last year, and that made me so mad on Kyle Pitts. And look at Baltimore. Do they love Likely and Andrews? I mean, people, look, Likely was worthy because that 36% is not unusual. You go back last year to my data, is there. And look at Buffalo. You don't think they like Kincaid, but Dawson Knox. He was a freebie in best ball, like my 20th pick. Why? Because I know every once in a while he's going to get me a spike week in best ball. And maybe in a wild situation, Dennis, he might be a bye week guy. If I'm just dead out with injuries, he's somebody, if the thing, favorable, Allen, if he doesn't run it in, that's the bad thing about Buffalo and scoring, is that Allen just sucks up the air for all the touchdown. But anyway, you start seeing things like, look at Atlanta loves its running backs. Bijan Robinson, yep. Boy, look at Buffalo, James Cook. 20%. I know, week 1, we're not panicking, but that disturbs me. I didn't get a lot of Cook just because last year they did this same distribution. So and you're saying, how do you remember that? Because I do it every week during the season, And I just remember when you do something 17, 18, and then the playoffs, and I see how teams act, you're surprised that a lot of teams cross over year to year and they do the same thing. And it's really interesting. So you can look at all the teams, Dennis, and see the different metrics. And so I've got all of them. And I wish I had the trick to make all my. I could do it, Dennis, but it takes longer. This is a shortcut way, and I just don't have time to make it pretty. Sorry, folks. But you don't pay anything for my stuff. So you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. That's what we say down here in the South, Dennis. So another way to look at this then is this running back, tight end, and wide receiver. And so I sorted each position from high to low usage, did my old box and whisker, found the extremes, extreme high usage in green, the extreme low in red. Week 1, I realized we're not mortgaging the house on this, but there's some things to think about here, right? So I've got all that for the tight ends and wide receivers. So let me stop here. I know Dennis, he's so polite and doesn't talk over me because he's a radio guy. So I'm going to let you jump in, Dennis. Do you want to find out anything or comment on my approach here? Anything you want to
No,
talk
I
about?
absolutely love the approach because I do love looking at the highs and lows of usage. And it doesn't mean, folks, if a running back who's on your roster happens to show up in the negative side of things, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a guy you don't want on your roster. What it means is you don't want to overpay for that player the following season. James Cook is a classic example of that kind of player. You would think the lead running back
In
on a
Buffalo.
really good offense would be somebody you would want on your team.
And you want
And
to pay high draft capital to get him? No.
and he shows 5 or 6 unbelievable highlight plays that we remember, that our brain remembers, seeing this guy make an unbelievable carry where he fought off 3 defenders and, then sprinted around the rest and down the sideline for the score. And we remember that. Our brain remembers that. But then you look at the data, and I'm not saying James Cook is a bad player.
No.
What I'm saying is the usage
Of the running backs.
of the running backs.
And so, Dennis, it invites us to go into deeper detail. That's
Yes.
what it points you to.
Yes. And those are the things that it should alert you to, and to understand, okay, this is one piece of data that is telling me be cautious. Now, if I go and I take the next level of data, say my MVP index, and you get another reason to be cautious.
And I pulled James Cook if you want to see that.
Yes. So those are the kinds of things that when you see these numbers of things happen and you see the negatives that might be there for a player, it just is that red flag to say, okay, this is the downside. Because what I see too many people do in fantasy football is they fall in love with a player. You should fall in love with your spouse,
yeah,
and
your dogs, and your cat, and your
well, the cats don't care.
Yeah,
the cats, your staff.
yeah. You,
dogs,
you serve them right.
Dogs, your family. Cats, your staff.
Okay.
But no, when it comes to a player, you should be able to look at that player. And classic example: won't find a bigger Chiefs fan than me. Won't find a bigger Patrick Mahomes fan than me. But when I look at Patrick Mahomes, I can point out 2 or 3 reasons why he might not be the most elite of elite quarterbacks in fantasy football. If you cannot look at any player in the league and see the good and the bad and be able to say something good or bad about that player, if you can't say the bad, you got blinders on. Blinders work great on horses that are stubborn and need a little correction to run their best race. Blinders, when it comes to risking money in sports betting, take the blinders off.
Yeah, I agree. So, Dennis, folks can check all this out. So, for instance, look at Bijan, 50 snaps last week. James Cook, 38. Yeah, I know we paid more, but if you paid too much for Cook, you're like, uh-oh. I mean, look, and here, Justice Hill, 43 snaps. He's going to be somebody that got my attention in waivers this week, folks. Not that I think Henry is bad. It's just this surprised me. This distribution wasn't predictable based on certainly ADP, right? I mean, I think Justice Hill was way deep in
Yep.
ADP. And so is that his handcuff? If Henry's hurt, you got Henry. I'd want Justice Hill. He may not be, the exact plug in, but he's going to have a piece and you can get him in what now. I wouldn't, I wouldn't invest my mortgage in him on waiver fab, but there's going to be people looking elsewhere this week, right? Mason, there's some other sexier names out there, and they may miss $1 or $5 out of 1,000. Justice Hill. See, I've already got my dollar bids in him, Dennis, and if I miss, I miss. Versus last year when Puka did it, I'm 400 or 500. Okay. And I got about half those. And I was so happy. Justice Hill is not a Puka, but he's worth a handcuff. If you got a dead spot or a weak spot, and I love those running backs, Dennis, that are, the next man up, the handcuff. And so I talk about pecking order, positional handcuffs, right? And I also include in my metrics the scoring level. Okay. I actually do PPR per snap. So we put it on a snap basis, and Henry was just basically it's the same. They scored week one the same amount of PPR points roughly. Okay. So
Yep.
I'm telling you, Justice Hill is worth your time, that kind of thing. James Cook, clearly the number one. Is it Ray Davis? I'm thinking
Yep.
Dennis and I
Yep.
are thinking he will ascend and beat Ty Johnson. Okay. So Dennis, don't throw away. I'm just warning you, don't do it, Dennis. I know Dennis loves to. No, Dennis is not foolish enough to do that. I'm just teasing him. But I have a lot of Ray Davis in best ball, and I'm not giving him up at all. I would not reach out for Ty Johnson if something happened to Cook. I'd stick with Davis and that kind of thing. So this is something you you can look at this on the phone and your iPad, and just while you're watching cartoons and still drinking a couple beers, or why don't you just look through this and just just scroll through the data, just kind of get that karma going, that Zen stuff happening, and just, hey, that's interesting. Jerome Ford, 57 snaps. Are you kidding me? But Pierre Strong scored about as good as he did at 18. Maybe Strong is the handcuff, but I'm not happy 57 and got me that. And in fact, Cleveland's usage, you can go back up. Where does Cleveland fall? Down second worst. So what that says in this case was that in Cleveland's case, they're loading all on one and the others are just fodder. That's what that tells. It's telling you a story. This data tells you a story, right? It's not, you don't stop here. Why is Cleveland? and you go down here and say, oh, 50 something. Damn, that's crazy. Boy, look at the snaps for the wide receivers so we can look at Cleveland wide receivers. You see, I wasn't planning on talking about that, but then I noticed, and I don't know if Cleveland's high or low, but Cleveland, where are you? I don't see you right now. Are you low? Or are you high? Did I miss Cleveland? I may have forgotten. Sometimes, Dennis, I probably, yeah, I missed Cleveland. Too bad. Okay, I've already published this, so you'll have to figure out yourself. But anyway, boy, that's a lot of snaps there. So Carolina, look at Carolina. Dante Thielen not going away. If you thought Thielen was going away, no, he actually scored better than Deontay. Xavier Leggett scored better. And look at these snaps, Dennis. Is there a muddled? I call this a muddled mess. Who's
Yeah,
the
when you
number one? I hate this. I mean,
no,
I'm
when you
hoping in
yeah,
2 or 3 weeks we'll have this clear, but I don't like this kind of distribution.
what this tells me is you got veteran, and then rookie, and then second year player in Mingo. When I see a first and a second year player that are on week one already getting the same number of snaps, that gets me worried
Yeah, it
if
does.
I'm owning those two veterans
Especially
because
Johnson, because we probably
oh,
paid more for him,
you paid yeah.
Yeah. But Thielen was cheap, so I picked him up
Oh,
in best ball.
Thielen was cheap. I picked up a lot of Xavier Leggett in best ball
He was cheap.
late. He was free. He was at the end of the draft, and I'm very intrigued when a rookie sees almost as many snaps as a veteran who's supposed to be the number one wide receiver. That to me is a very intriguing situation. And so this snap data, Professor,
Yeah.
the way you've laid it out,
Yeah. And look at
gives
Denver. Denver,
yeah.
Devon Velda, great score, but 34, that, you wondered, is he a rookie too?
6th round pick rookie.
Yeah, well,
So
look at that. Scored and is, you wonder, did I pay too much for Sutton?
yeah, in redraft, even though this is 1 week, and usually I don't overreact at 1 week, when I saw Marvin Mims
Boy, look at that.
with
That's
almost
sad.
nothing,
That's
I
sad.
said, I can upgrade. And
They hate on him. They hated him last year, and they're not loving him this
he's
year. It's
he's a
sad.
big play guy who just doesn't seem to understand how to play in the NFL yet. And here's the thing: if I have to go back and get him again off the waiver wire,
He'll be
once he
cheap.
gets it, he'll still be cheap. So,
Yeah.
but I what I really liked when I looked at the snap data was Detroit, because
Yeah, did you see that?
I thought Jamison Williams would have a good year.
He's right
And
there with Sun
and
God.
he's right there with the Sun God. And but here's the thing: is I love the fact that the Sun God got a high number of snaps because
60's nice.
yeah, because I got worried that when I saw the really bad game from the Sun God, my first initial reaction was, is he hurt? Did he miss snaps?
No.
And when I saw that he didn't miss snaps, I said, okay, he'll be fine next week. Because sometimes the opposing defense will try to take the best player out of the game.
Look at Gibbs and Montgomery, the scoring and the snaps.
Oh,
boy, if you paid too much for Gibbs, you wish you'd waited for Montgomery if you get the same. I mean, I think it will change, Dennis, but these are the kind. This is what gives me heartburn when I see this. I drafted Gibbs in it. Did I draft him too early? Did I just get suckered again? And you just worried. Somebody like Mixon, though, I drafted him any and everywhere and loved 57 snaps and great scoring per snap. That was just love it, love it. Schultz, I'm glad he was there. He was quiet, but I like to see that. And what worried me about Laporta is, I wished he'd had more snaps than 48. Look at Schultz, 63, Dennis. That I may have overpaid for him. I don't know. See, we're guessing this first week. Look at Gabe Davis in Jacksonville. Nice. But Brian Thomas, the rookie, you know, outpointed Christian Kirk. That's intriguing. And he's going to be hot on the waiver because he scored. See, what Thomas, I would like, Dennis, is somebody like him that didn't score this week, but got a lot of action.
Yeah.
You could have got him a lot cheaper in Fab. He's not available in my FFPC. I checked, you know, so I go through and check. But he wasn't. I mean, come on. You got 20 rounds. He's gone.
He's not available in any of my leagues because he's on my team.
Oh, come on, David. Come on. Not. What do you think about K? Okay, let's talk KC and then we'll wrap it up here. Rice, worthy? Is he worthy? He was worthy of scoring. And oof. Justin Watson, I think those snaps are a little low. I'd like to see Rashee a little higher than 42.
Yeah, I definitely want to see Rashee Rice. If he's going to be the true number one, I want to see him getting
50s, 55,
90% of the snaps, 85 to 90%.
I don't know about
this was too low.
Yeah.
And granted, Kansas City just kind of they did what they needed to do. They were very efficient.
And they do that a lot. They don't kill themselves. You know, they're Andy would not look. He wants another face shield up there in the Hall of Damn Fame, right? He wants matching face shield. Maybe he'll get some Taylor Swift bling on the second one. He'll donate.
But here's the thing that worries me on the fantasy football side of things. I can see him wearing Taylor
some bling,
Swift.
some pink sparkles. Yeah,
that would be good for him.
It would be a good look for Papa.
Oh goodness! Now the thing that worries me here, as somebody who's well invested in Rashee Rice, is this was a low snap count, and Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be part of that defense more and more as time goes on, and Hollywood Brown comes back from injury.
Yeah, so what does that do to all this?
Who does he take snaps away from? So that's what's got me worried, is that I have a lot of Rice, have a lot of Worthy. Thought they'd be the 1 and 2 for the Chiefs, but it's again this group
of Cody,
good receivers.
You mentioned him. Look at there, 69. But see, the metrics, because I only look at this level, it's one of the low tight end because you basically got divided by 3. Yep. But it can mean one guy gets them all. And he's on where he's available. I'm fishing for him too. Probably not going to get him for $1 though, Dennis. Everybody's awake. So I may have to spend a little more money where I've got, Njoku, for instance. I've got, Ferguson. Some of these injuries, I'm having to scramble a little bit to get a warm body there. Just to let everybody know, at the end is $1 on Zach Ertz. Just if the high money, if people go crazy over Parkinson and they overspend, then I'll creep on with Zach Ertz and whoever I can find to flip in and out. I'm not going to spend half my fab on Cody Parkinson, folks. Don't do it.
No, you got to be real light on your Kobe Parkinson, because while he's getting the snaps, he never has. He doesn't have that track record of great performance. And this week on my article, I kind of advised that go light on a guy like that. Don't go too crazy. I said he's definitely just that 5% fab money buy. He's not a big guy that I want to be primarily invested in, versus Isaiah Likely, that if he was on your waiver wire, you're spending 60 plus of your bank. You blow it all because you'll have more points per dollar spent Bucky Irving was another big one, but Jordan Mason wasn't for me this week, because if CMC is back, then Jordan Mason goes into returning to maybe 15 to 20 snaps. So we have to look at this data. We have to understand what the data means.
Yep.
But Professor, I love the way you're looking at the snap data. I think it's unique and a way that people can gain an advantage on their competition. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com and check out the professor's snap data. You could see all of my data as well from week one. Very low scoring week. We will see if that trend continues, and we'll be back here next week on For Frequency's Sake for another edition of the Data Lab.
Get to work, folks.